All right, here we go. Wow, been a little bit sick. My voice a little bit deeper in timbre and tone than I am used to. In a world dominated by fantasy sports. That's kind of cool. How's it going? Coming at you from the beautiful block here in lovely Dayton, Ohio. Not long ago, I was taking Uber back from the airport, and my driver, who was a very pleasant, very friendly gay man, and we spoke for quite a while, and he, asked me for the intersection where he was dropping me off, and I told him that I lived on the corner of Bareback and Stretch, and until that moment had not realized that should I ever consider a change of sexual persuasion, I have the most beautiful cross street / address by which to do so that I think I could possibly imagine. How's everyone doing? Here we are with Game 4 of the Golden State Portland series. Portland going on a nice stretch of blowing pretty significant leads during this series. Unfortunately, because again, more games, more basketball. We could be looking at a week off between the semifinals and the finals, which of course is nice because we get a couple of healthy teams. Looks like, judging by my hair, I am about ready to go up against Vegeta in the final fight for all the marbles. So here we are doing it to it. I guess as always, we will discuss last night's game for a little bit. Was a fun one. Had some of the guys we were looking to break out. I guess Pascal Siakam wasn't so much of a breakout. He was very successful in game one, or fairly successful. Got himself north of 40. But we talked about a little bit of his chance of a rebound, and literally and figuratively. And then when the news came out that Nick Nurse decided not to do really stupid things with his lineup, mentioned, that I would try to expose myself to Marcus All, and I think I said I'd try to get 25% of that, which would have been well higher than the field, and that obviously worked out fairly well, but not like I was over the moon on either of those guys. So I can't take too much credit there, but nice to see Toronto get on the board there. Nice to see Nick Nurse not do something dumb in the name of, to give his team a chance to, play the best guys at home. We got the Norman Powell game we expected. Was fairly popular. Obviously liked him a lot, just based on the fact they said he'd get more minutes. The overtimes minted some people, crushed some other people. Someone says, who is starting for Golden State? I don't know per se. I will put my spoon out there and throw out a guess of Damian Jones and McKinney in the unknown slots at this point. But Steve Kerr is really the king of doing this, where he will have guys miss games for injury or rest once in a while of the year, and you're just occasionally like, oh, Jacob Evans is getting the start. I did not see that coming, or, this time Sean Livingston's in there. Didn't expect that. Kevon Looney, sometimes it's Jordan Bell. I, with very little confidence, say I expect McKinney to be out there at the 3, and Damian Jones to take the... Damian Jones in Game 3, Andrew Bogut in Games 1 and 2, ceremonial, playing 3 to 7 minutes before giving way to Kevon Looney. Sure, I guess we'll start talking from that point. So, the question will be who stands to profit from the absence of Andre Iguodala, who's having some calf issues, isn't feeling too great down there. Obviously, they feel confident in the series. Playing him today would have been seemingly pretty stupid, because he's a pretty key piece of this rotation. Obviously, former Finals MVP. He's getting old. Not as old as me, but he's old, and they protect him a lot during the regular season. We were talking about yesterday, looking at real plus minus, which is a flawed statistic, but none of them are perfect. But by any looking at wins over replacement or efficiency or real plus minus or any statistics, Andre Iguodala is still really, really good. And so, like me, he's really, really good in limited doses, and it would obviously be foolish, and so they break him out in the playoffs, and when people are injured, you can try to put on him, play 31 minutes, play 38 minutes, play a pile of time. Obviously, that's caught up with him for the minute, but playing him this series, barring Portland having won games 3 and 4, which obviously they lost game 3, or barring Portland now winning games 4 and 5, would seem tactically unwise. So I think we can safely expect not to see him again. I can't think of much reason to play Durant or Cousins in the event they were available for game 5 or 6 if necessary. I've heard people make the counter argument, well, you want to get them back up to game speed. It's like, yeah, they're going to go back up to game speed for 16 minutes and then take 9 days off. Just let them take the full, 20 whatever days they would have gotten off since Cousins obviously a little bit longer, but the extended periods of time they would have gotten off from their injuries. Hard to think that this Golden State team can't pull out a win in the next 2, to say the very least. Game 5 at Oracle seems pretty sexy. So again, always looking for some sort of edge, something to do with the news. I suppose the thing that seems least likely to be fully capitalized on by the field would be to look at how the absence of Iguodala increases the value of some of the Trailblazers, and I think the most likely name that I would put on that list would be CJ McCollum. So, Iguodala in the series had actually guarded perfectly evenly, if I believe. I looked this up before, I want to check this. Yes, he was the primary defender for 52 possessions on Al-Farouq Aminu, and the primary defender for 52 possessions on Damian Lillard. Dead even, 28 on CJ McCollum. That doesn't mean a lot in that Alfonso McKinney and whomever else is replacing him, and we can talk a little more about exactly how I expect those minutes to be apportioned, but the really relevant parts are, I have McKinney projected for either 27 or 28 minutes and about 23 fantasy points. He makes a very good value play. He will be a better value play the later it is that they make this announcement, but he obviously picked up some extra time in the second half. He's one of the guys on the bench they have a little more trust for. When they play Jordan Bell and Quinn Cook and Jonas Jerebko, it's one of those like, okay, get in there, do a good job type things out of Steve Kerr. McKinney is a little less that. He's still not good by any means, and he has real issues defensively. And that bringing me to my point being, they basically had made sure to jump up and down on Damian Lillard for this series, and thinking that he was the largest threat out there, and we've got to guard him as much as possible. I think the net effect of this change is that you just get more plus matchups out of CJ McCollum relative to than Damian Lillard. Now, you can argue that he spent, not that many possessions, but 30 to 40% of the possessions that Lillard was out there, he was guarded by Iguodala, and if somehow that gets directly translated over to McKinney, then that's a big benefit for Damian Lillard. And you can certainly, spin that a little more even that now that everyone, including Steve Kerr, knows that Lillard is injured and McCollum's, had some impressive games here this series, the playoffs in general, Steve Kerr doesn't follow through with making stopping Damian Lillard priority 1. And I don't have a great answer for that. I can't tell you whether or not they now go like, all right, Clay, you're now by far our best perimeter defender, and he is now by far their best perimeter defender. They had several good ones at the start of the series. Kevin Durant is a really good defender. Andre Iguodala is a really good defender. Getting rid of those guys, you're down to one guy who's doing a brilliant job out there in perimeter defense really on this team, and that's Klay Thompson. So, there is some tea leaf reading and guesswork in, do they just do everything they can to keep Klay on Lillard that much more? How does that affect Klay? Do his minutes pop up? Or do they run it roughly the way they were? And this obviously gets dovetailed into the conversation as to how healthy Damian Lillard is. If you've been living under a rock, Damian Lillard, after Game 3, came out, and it came out. I don't know if he said it or if it was revealed otherwise. I actually don't recall what the primary source was there, but it came out that Damian Lillard had been playing for about a game and a half with separated ribs, or a rib separation, which basically what happened is Kevon Looney squished him. He dove after a ball and was lying on his stomach, and Kevon Looney dropped his 240 or whatever pounds on his back, and yeah, that hurts, and spread the ribs a little bit, and that shit hurts. Lillard has basically indicated it's more of a pain tolerance issue, which is, again, what it would feel like. But you spread your ribs a little bit of the cartilage in there gets torn, separated, doesn't feel great. So, yeah, again, obviously no tomorrow for this team. You could see 48 minutes of Damian Lillard tonight, wouldn't shock me. I'd be pretty surprised if the number of minutes played by him and CJ McCollum tonight in anything but an absolute ass whipping doesn't start with a 4. So, whereas we had in game 1 of the series, your best possible lineups had neither CJ nor Dame. That hasn't been the case in games 2 or games 3, and I'd be a little surprised if it was the case here. And again, don't forget we're removing Andre Iguodala and replacing him with someone who doesn't play defense as well as Andre Iguodala, because as he said live on ESPN, these motherfuckers are crazy, when he was looking at his hands after some brilliant defensive work on Lillard at the end of sealing game 3, sealing one of the games. I forget where he dropped that specific quote. So I guess I would say the combination of the absence of Iguodala, there being no tomorrow, them being in Portland, I'm really upset if a lineup I built doesn't have CJ or Dame in it. You can play them both. Who were in the optimal lineup in Game 2 had both of those guys. Game 3 had one of them. Game 1 had none of them. But I would I see lineups bouncing around. I've seen a number today that people seem pretty confident in that didn't have McCollum or Lillard. That feels dicey to me for all those reasons, and hopefully we've covered that enough in depth. Again, as far as the Warriors go with the Iguodala injury, it makes McKinney a fine play. Points per dollar, he's a good play. Not as excited about that as I was about the Myers-Leonard thing, because again, this will be known more in advance, and is I think presumptively the case now, and a lot of people will act that way. And again, he was in tournament-winning lineups already, so the ownership will be pretty substantial, and he's going to move into the starting lineup, so he'll spend even more time with Clay and Steph, and is not the most brilliant fantasy player already, so like the matchup. It's just fine. Again, I have him 27, 28 minutes, 23 fantasy points, 23 and a half, one or the other. Forget where I ended, but he's fine to good. You end up with him, no problem. Real chance he's the best value play out there. You don't have him, that's fine. He's going to be somewhat popular and absolutely can fail. He's a little bit better on FanDuel, where he's only 500 off the floor. In a single lineup, I probably don't go there. Simply because he'll probably get the time, but I can't guarantee it. So there's a chance that he only plays 20 minutes and, Steve Kerr decides to focus on going extra large and giving Looney 31 minutes and Bell 21. Or the game turns into a blowout and his time goes to Evans or Quinn Cook. Or Sean Livingston plays 26 minutes. Or McKinney actually gets the time and just isn't that great and puts up 18 fantasy points in his 28 minutes, and there are just the Seth Currys, Evan Turners, Zach Collins, other value plays you can get to that will be lower owned and don't project that much worse and do have similar upside. So beyond that, I do think it's like I did tick Kevon Looney's minutes up a couple. I think it's just a greater chance they spend a little time going larger. Which you can get away with against this team versus their starting lineup. Let's see, other things. So Terry Stotts did something very smart and then something very stupid in the last game. Something that many people, including myself, had been advocating for him to do. He finally did in the first half of the last game, where he kept Enes Kanter off the court when Steph Curry was out there, because it's a really difficult matchup, and basically having Steph and certainly Steph and Clay. But having Steph out there with Cantor out there is a real defensive issue. And Steph played the entire first quarter, as he is wont to do, and then checked out at the start of the second quarter, and then as Cantor checked in for, I believe, exactly 5 minutes and 52 minutes, and checked out exactly when Steph Curry checked back in. I was like, okay, good job. Let him go out, and he was very, very good. In those, I think, slightly less than 6 minutes, he had 7 points and 5 rebounds. It's really good. It's 2 fantasy points a minute. He had, some 50% usage. He looked great. It's absolutely what you should do with the guy. And then in the second half, he brought him in for a minute in the third quarter only, when Steph was out there, and he got roasted and pulled him out after a minute or 90 seconds, and then didn't bring him back even when Steph took a rest again at the start of the fourth. I don't get it. It was seemingly, again, sort of like matching Gasol's minutes with Embiid's. Not complicated, pretty obvious play that, again, millions of people called for and said, why don't you do this? And then he did it, and it worked really well, and then he went away from it in the second half, which was awfully confusing. But I have no reason to, played intelligently, you would get 12 or 13 minutes out of Enes Kanter tonight, and, I'd project him for, it's a pretty good matchup for him at that spot. I'd project him for 17, 18 fantasy points. He's still not cheap enough you can really go there, but I can expect the continuance of the minutes at center to go to Myers Leonard, who I presume will start again, and played extremely well in the first half, okay in the second half. I like Zach Collins quite a bit in tournaments. I'm a slightly bigger fan of playing Zach Collins than playing Seth Curry in a tournament on DraftKings, where they have basically the same price. I think they're $3,200 and $3,400 respectively. I do have Curry projected for about 1.5 points more. He got 30 minutes in the last game. Obviously, he's shown he has steals upside in this series. Raw points, that makes a little more sense for me. But all you need is some Myers Leonard foul trouble, which really isn't hard to get into in this spot, and you could get 28 minutes out of Zach Collins here. And I expect the ownership to actually be a decent bit lower. So in one lineup, I'd probably go with Zach Collins. No issue if you go with Seth Curry instead. I would prefer either to the similarly priced Al-Farouq Aminu, if you were looking at that as a consideration. Again, he's apparently, regardless as to how well he plays, not going to get significant time in the second half. Lillard is a really interesting spot here. I like Damian Lillard a fair amount in tournaments. There's a very public injury. But that injury occurred 4 days ago now, and a couple days ago you referred to it as just a pain management issue, and, adrenaline is pretty remarkable shit, and you'd like to think he'd like to take one home for Moda, so I generally like Curry. Raw points per dollar, I prefer McCollum at his salary on both sites by a little bit, but I think I just said Curry, I meant Lillard, obviously, we're talking about here. But again, I'm disappointed if a lineup I'm building doesn't have Lillard or McCollum in it. There's just too many things that push it that way. Again, this is game 4 of the series. The only 2 players to occur in the best possible lineup in all 3 of the first 3 games were Steph and Draymond. Twice in games 1 and 2, you wanted Steph as captain, Draymond in the line. In game 3, Draymond had the nutty, and not terribly surprising there. Still a big fan of Steph. And obviously these are the studs in the series, but still a big fan of Clay as well. Those guys are going to do a ton on this team. The matchup with really no defensive front court to speak of for Portland. Someone today showed me something where someone was like, Myers Leonard is a huge improvement on defense, I think were the exact words, over Enes Kanter. He's not. He's arguably a little bit better. He's still bad. The best of them defensively, if he can stay out of foul trouble, is Zach Collins by a lot. And on a scale of 1 to 10, Zach Collins is like a 4 out of 10. But Myers Leonard is, not accurate. But got the start last game. Had a lot of energy. Looked good. So, that's the way they're going right now. But it's not like, we're getting Myers Leonard out there to shore up the defense, or that's a reasonable expectation with him out there. He's got some real positioning issues, some above the neck issues on defense that are pretty relevant to look at there. But I do think it's more likely that they just go big a little bit more, that in a close game, Steve Kerr stops using a dartboard to figure out who he's going to play at center and when, and you just get 29 minutes out of Kevon Looney or something like that. I don't expect him to be super popular today, so probably would end up a little over the field on Kevon Looney. Other things to talk about. Yeah, again, if you have any questions, if you're already a member at awesemo.com, go ahead and fire up some questions through the premium Slack chat. Let me know what I said that you disagree with. It tends to lead to a good conversation. If you're watching the show on the YouTube and not a member, go ahead and send me a tweet at FastEddieFear, and we will address your questions as well. So... yeah, I suppose, for everyone there's an appropriate point of ownership. And, that point exists, so it's a hard question for guys like Draymond. I've liked Draymond every game of the series. I like him tonight. It's really hard for him not to get, a few extra rebounds. It's not like Iguodala was sucking up a lot of usage. He would take 3 shots a game or 6 shots a game. So it's not like Iguodala being absent is freeing up a lot of usage. I've read that today too. That's not. He has a very Draymond-like role in the offense, which is very good job as secondary or tertiary facilitator. Makes the smart passes, falls into a few assists that way, takes some open threes. Can drive to the basket in this last game. The game 3 was maybe the best game of Draymond's career. He's had some pretty exceptional games from either a fantasy or a real life perspective. Wasn't close to his best fantasy game, though it was obviously still great. Dropped a 60 whatever the hell burger, but he was really good in everything you can do. Made his free throws, was defensively great, initiated the offense, drove to the basket when things were getting a little bit stale out there. So really superlative performance out of Draymond in that last game. No reason to go against him, and the price is up significantly. It should be pointed out that I think game 1 of this series, Draymond Green cost $9,000. Now he costs $10,600 on DK. Now on FanDuel, I think he's 16 to Steph, 17 to Lillard's 15. So, he has been consistently exceptional throughout the series, but his price is up significantly on both sites, like $2,500 on FanDuel and $1,600 on DK from the beginning of the series. And he's probably going to be higher on than he has been at any other game in the series. So there is an ownership point which he won't be too far from, if not up to, where you're going to want to come in under the field. I'm guessing he's going to be in the 50 to 50s. That's about it. It's a hard spot for him to fail in, but certainly not impossible. So it's one of those situations where, obviously, from any sort of statistical basketball non-ownership based standpoint, yeah, Draymond is great. The floor is really safe, just doing enough for this team right now. Hard for him not to get the 10 rebounds. Pretty hard for him not to get at least close on the assists. Taking some more ownership on the offensive end of the court. Obviously, a guy who contributes with steals and blocks more frequently than just about any other player in the league. But there's a point when the price goes up and the ownership goes up that you have to back off. I imagine he's near that point. I imagine I would be at about the field, but you can certainly get away from it. Let's look at the first round of questions. We got about 20 minutes to go. If you're something you're curious about and I haven't talked about it, please send me in a message. Do you see any amount of minutes increase for Aminu on FanDuel? The Leonard Collins experiment doesn't seem real effective. I don't. Aminu's just been really bad. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. But you had game 2, I believe, where Aminu was really good in the first half. Made a couple 3-pointers, looked great, played he played more in the first half than he had been playing, or he was out there for 14 minutes or so in the first half. And then still played shit in the second half. So they really seem to have intelligently, in my view, just said, screw it, we're going to go small ball and try to outscore your asses. And, the removal of Iguodala would further that decision, in my opinion. So, no, I don't expect Aminu's minutes to increase. Now, again, Stotts specifically, and almost every coach in the postseason has done things here that I haven't expected. So, not shocked if well, I guess I would be shocked if that happened. If you got more than say like 22 minutes out of him, I'd be pretty surprised. McKinney will start. Thank you for the 7 people who tweeted at me in the last few minutes that. Draymond's captain ownership is projected at low 11%. I have a hard time seeing it'll be that low. Yeah, I think it'll be somewhere around 20 at captain and 50 to 55 in net ownership. I think CJ and Dame will be in the optimal lineup tonight. If you could remand your comment, because someone asked what I was saying, and someone quoted me as saying, I think CJ and Dame will be in the optimal lineup tonight. I don't think that's impossible. I think it's a little more likely one of them will be. Of those 2 guys, I think the most likely outcome is 1, but I think 2 is more likely than 0. So, top of my heading these numbers, I'd say it's 50% likely one of them is in there, 30% likely they're both in there, 20% likely that neither is, if I had to ballpark it. But if you have a second to message Fields Money Mood and let him know that that's not exactly what I said. But I would be really surprised if one of them didn't get it. I won't go through all those reasons again. McKinney starting yet. We've been through all that. What are your thoughts on the cheapy captains? I will look at the cheap dudes' prices and talk about who I think would be a not unreasonable captain. Again, that hasn't worked yet. And you need specifically kind of weird things for that to happen, but basically you need obviously that guy to do very well, all the other guys to do well, and no one to do too well. So if you play, this probably doesn't add up, and this is probably more salary than you have, but hypothetically if you play Alfonso McKinney a captain, and that allows you to play Clay, Steph, Draymond, CJ, and Lillard, which I think that's still more salary than you have, but if you did that, for that to work, you need McKinney to get 20, which morphs into 30 or something like that, and you need those guys to all perform to a certain degree and no one to perform to a much greater degree than the others. So if those guys all score 37 to 49, then yes, that can end up being the best lineup, but it hasn't happened yet. Just the nuances of having a lower number of actual players makes that a little less likely on super small slates than on bigger slates. So I'm slightly disinclined towards it, but obviously some percentage of the time you will have those conditions hit and have a $3,000 captain work out for you. It wasn't, I don't believe it was, I could be wrong. I don't believe it was Norman Powell yesterday, and Norman Powell put up, and we had a pretty bad Giannis game, especially considering 2 overtimes, a pretty bad Kawhi game, considering 2 overtimes, and Norman Powell was 2,200 and put up 30, and nope, still wasn't right. So like yesterday, the best captain was. Hold on, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. This is getting weird. Am I looking at the wrong? Yesterday you wanted Norman Powell, but the best captain was still Marc Gasol. So it's you also need all the guys in that price range, and there aren't many in this series. What's weird is you have, Steph, Draymond, Lillard, Clay, McCollum, who are kind of in that tier, but they're still proportionally more expensive than the Marc Gasols, or in Game 1 of that series, Brook Lopez, when he was the best possible captain. Those guys were still cheaper than that tier, so that tier in this game is really absent of guys. With Enes Kanter falling out of the rotation, it's like the guys who cost that much are Mo Harkless, which, seems a little dicey to go. So it's unlikely to get the guy who costs in that, $6,000 on DK, $10,000 on FanDuel, dropping the 50 or 60 burger that we got one game out of Brook Lopez and one game out of Marc Gasol so far. So again, I'm slightly disinclined, but that's a perfectly reasonable question. But again, we had a couple really good games yesterday. Norman Powell gave you 30 for $2,200, and George Hill gave you, I think, a bit over 40 for 30 whatever the hell $100 yesterday. And it was still they wanted Marc Gasol captain instead. So you really need a specific set of conditions which I think is less likely than not. Raw points, McKinney or Powell? That's a very good question. They're very close to each other. I believe I have Powell. I have Powell right now by about 1.5 points. How do you feel about playing Myers, Leonard, and Collins in the same lineup? I may or may not have that in the DraftKings lineup I've built in front of me. Doesn't bother me at all. A, they're both cheap to very cheap when you look at Collins. B, they play next to each other quite a bit. And seeing one game slate, you have to abandon a lot of those principles anyway. So I'm absolutely fine. And D, people will have the same thought process you do and go like, oh, I don't want to play both of those guys. And so you end up with a really unique lineup construction. It's not hard at all for me to imagine getting 60 collectively out of Collins and Myers Leonard. So yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of that construction, actually. Thoughts on running Dame MVP and CJ All-Star on FanDuel? I'm fine with it. Yeah, I imagine I like that a fair bit as construction too. Whenever you're talking about these one-game slates, you want a chance on taking down not just the best lineup, but the best and most unique lineup. And I definitely think there's a chance that Dame is the highest scoring player and CJ is the second highest scoring player. You need that third player to be one of the Warriors, I think, because almost certainly the next guy on that list is going to be Steph, probably, if not him, Draymond, if not him, Clay. By far, those are the most likely three guys to fill that spot. But it's not at all impossible to see 60 out of Steph, 60 out of Lillard, 51 out of McCollum, 49 out of Steph, 44 out of Draymond, 41 out of Clay, and then you have the nuts there. So, yes, I think that construction. Again, whenever you make a weird lineup like that, playing Myers Leonard and Zach Collins on DraftKings was the conversation we were just having. It's whether or not what you're sacrificing in likelihood of occurrence is worth how much you're sacrificing in just raw production. Because they are priced a little better, but whomever you're going to have in that number 3 spot is quite possibly Steph or maybe it's Draymond. I don't know who your bargain guys are, so I'd just be guessing. But I don't think it's that far-fetched that lineup gets there, and I do think it's fairly unique. It's the same thing with Zach Collins and Myers Leonard. Is it ideal to have one once you have the other? No, they would be more negatively correlated than positively correlated. People often say, like, I want to play, DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. Are they negatively correlated? And everyone is negatively correlated and positively correlated at the same time in different ways. On one-game slates, the negatives do tend to be both stronger and more relevant when you net them out, because one of the ways in which playing, say, DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge in the same amount is positively correlated is you occasionally get double overtime games or quadruple overtime games where having them both can work out better for you. So you're always netting those things out, but on a one-game slate, overtimes are not necessarily irrelevant because you may be playing more or less starters or more or less finishers, as the case may be. How many minutes do I think Bell plays with Iguodala out? I don't think it necessarily affects Bell. I can see Bell getting an extra minute or two. I have Bell at 13 minutes right now. 8 wouldn't surprise me. 19 wouldn't surprise me. I still think it's most likely he ends up in the low to mid-teens. Points per dollar, Bledsoe at 5.7 or Hill at 5.2 on FanDuel. Yeah, it's great that that's a question now. I'm personally a little gratified to see all the love George Hill is getting. He's been a really underrated basketball player for a while. I mean, people like shit. I'm like, George Hill is terrible. Fantasy, he's sometimes really terrible, a la Marc Gasol, he's really, really good at both ends of the court. George Hill, and he's gotten moved around a lot. You had Spurs George Hill and Pacers George Hill and Cavs George Hill and Jazz George Hill, and now we're, the guys, moved around a fair bit. I'm a pretty big George Hill fan. Just raw points per dollar. I still think I will slightly have Bledsoe higher. I haven't done out all my projections for tomorrow. You're spending 500 extra for him. I imagine I still have Bledsoe a hair higher, but it's really close. Please make a genuine effort to eliminate the lip smacking. It drives you crazy. Is it that? It's not lip smacking. Lip smacking is like, I don't think I do that, but Do I like? Okay, I'll get on that. Hood versus Curry and a FanDuel single game, leaning Curry with his minutes, but he disappears offensively. Yeah, I think that's the right choice. Hood is not 100%. Now again, he's had 2 extra days off, like Lillard may have recovered from the knee injury. Oh, that's not lip smacking either. That's like, I don't know what you would describe that as onomatopoetically, but someone just said Siakam. I don't know what that's referring to. Fast Eddie Fear, Siakam. I don't know what that's referring to. Raw points, McKinney or Powell. I have Powell by a hair. Hood versus Curry on FanDuel single game, leaning Curry. Yeah, I still believe in that. What's your take on Bell if he randomly gets a start? I'd be very surprised if he did, because I think they want him to play more than that, and that's just not what they've been doing with that role. I think they give Jones the start again. Does no Iggy make Mo Harkless more appealing? Yes. He's just a guy who plays on the wing, and they're replacing Iggy with a guy who... So yes, Harkless, but I mean, so is McCollum, so is Lillard. Ownership projections suggest a Leonard Collins with the other stars lineup could be fairly popular. Okay, I don't know what they have him at. I think Myers Leonard will be somewhere around 40%. I think Zach Collins will be in the mid to high 20s. Harkless or Looney? Harkless is the cash option there in tournaments. Looney is the cash option there. Tournaments I could see going to Harkless. The lip smacking is kind of hot. I appreciate that. Whatever it is, that's it. McCollum Bell or McKinney Clay on FanDuel? If you don't have Lillard, it's absolutely McCollum Bell. If you have Lillard, I probably go McKinney Clay. Bell starting. Fuck me. Well, yeah, I gotta look at a couple things now. I like that we're spicing up our lives. I have a feeling I'm now going to like him a fair amount. He's just, first of all, he is much better at this current moment than Damian Jones is. But, you know, he's played meaningful minutes every game in this series. He's played 11, 14, and 15 minutes. Yep, I just did it again. It's that. Okay. Okay, we're going to try to get away from that. All right, let me check his price. I think he's 22 on DK. We'll start with that. And now I have to see what he's done in previous starts. Just give me a minute to get all the information. He is 7,000 on FanDuel, so he is not that cheap. Which is interesting. Well, what time is it? Is McKinney a bad play now? No, that has nothing to do with McKinney. Bell is starting for Damian Jones. McKinney is starting for Andre Iguodala. So one has little to do with the other. It's in theory slightly bad for everyone else on the Warriors because Bell is a slightly more talented player who will be a little more involved in the offense. But it doesn't affect your McKinney play at all. Is this relevant at all? It is relevant probably, if you want my best guess, just in that Jordan Bell will now be higher owned, which will make the other value plays likely lesser owned. I like Jordan Bell. I like Jordan Bell as a basketball player. I originally liked him a lot more than Kevon Looney, whose game has improved quite a bit. I don't think he gets significant extra minutes. I had him for 13 minutes. He has played 11 to 15 minutes all 3 games this series. What they are doing with that rotation doesn't involve giving the starting center a butt-ton of minutes at this point in time. Now, he's better and was higher up in the pecking order than certainly Damian Jones and quite possibly Andrew Bogut. So, while I still think the most likely scenario is him playing low to mid-teens in minutes, it's more likely with either of those guys that he randomly plays 20. And the news came out late enough that the ownership boost should not be significant. You're still looking at 18, 20 minutes. Seth Curry at captain on DK, long shot. That's fine. Running any of those guys at captain, I did quite a spiel before on value at captain on DK. In a single lineup, that's not generally where I'm looking to go. I talked about how we got there with Gasol and we got there with Brolo, but 3 games through in the series, it's been two Stephs and a Draymond as the appropriate captains to have. Bell or Seth Curry? Yeah, that's a really interesting decision at this point. I want to be clear before answering this question. I don't know. I don't know any of the answers I give. But I have very little feel for what Steve Kerr is going to do here. Again, the starters at center in the series have played 3, 7, and 3 minutes. So there's some chance you now get fewer minutes out of Bell. And I'm not sure exactly the reasoning. He likes Damian Jones a lot, who again was the starter and playing 20-plus minutes frequently earlier this year. So maybe it's like, I want to give Damian Jones some more time. I'm going to bring him off the bench because the way I'm running the rotations right now, that's where he gets a dozen minutes instead of 3, 5, 6, 7. I don't know what the hell is going on here. My gut would still be to play Seth Curry. No, I didn't give a betting take today. Got there again yesterday. I think we're sitting at like 8-3 or something. The betting takes, I should stop talking about DFS entirely, although I'm going to go with small sample size and bullshit luck for how that has worked out so well. But yes, I will largely say that probably because the ownership is now going to come up a little bit and people like cash considerations quite a bit as a player, that I'm probably not going to bite real hard on Jordan Bell. I wish I could give, a strong take on I think this, that, and the other thing happens, but I have, first of all, I'm awfully self-conscious about making noises with my mouth now. And I want to blame you guys I'm already self-conscious about a lot of things. Now we've got to add that to the list of my neuroses and phobias, so thanks, guys. So there's that first. But beyond that, moving into the starting lineup, as is apparently not known by most people, of and by itself, not a good thing if it doesn't come with extra minutes. Now he spends more time on the court next to world-class players. Now, in fairness, this offense functions much more efficiently with the starters than with the bench because you have, GOAT point guards and things of that nature. But I still think moving into the starting lineup is at best a lateral move. It doesn't make me think he's necessarily going to be more productive. So I will probably avoid more than give it a shot. I think is the slightly better play. There's some chance, we'll guess at what it is. There's some chance he now plays single-digit minutes. I don't think it's that likely, but I'll call it 20%. That he just gets fucked in minutes because they gave him the start, which feels weird, but I do think that's quite a bit possible. A reasonable chance that it doesn't affect much and he just now plays with the starters and still gets the 15 fantasy points you'd project him for in 15 minutes. And, some chance that he now all of a sudden has a big-ass game. So, we are locked. Let's look at some ownership, see what Saved by the Jordan Bell got up to as far as his ownership numbers. And talk some turkey here. So, let's see over on the FanDuel. Look at some ownership numbers. We can check and see if my guesswork was right on Draymond to captain. I thought would be around 20% now. All right, percentages on dudes. FanDuel, Steph Curry, 61%. That's too low. Damian Lillard, 41%. Klay Thompson, 48%. I'm pretty excited about those Steph and Lillard ownerships. Who the hell are people playing? Myers Leonard, 43%. Slight overreaction. $8,000. Alfonso McKinney, 31. Draymond, 70. I like Draymond a lot. He's $16,000. He's 70% owned. I'd want less. Like that's too much for me on FanDuel. He's the second most expensive player. And again, FanDuel scoring really favors him. Look, DK does have the double-doubles and triple-doubles, which are pretty likely in this scenario. Al-Farouq Aminu, 18%. Again, these are all FanDuel numbers. Yeah, there's a lot of that particular lineup. There's a lot of Steph, Clay, Draymond, McKinney, Aminu. It's half the lineups I click on. Enes Kanter, 7%. $9,500. Still don't think I want it. 7% still a little high. I think I'd want like 3 or 4. I think it'd have to be even less. Jordan Bell, 20%. Yeah, I would probably rather throw my $7 at... I did it again. There it is. Drive me crazy. It's all up in my grill now. It's all up in my head. Alright, the $500,000 best in the West. Oh, people are tagging me with things. Hold on, let me look over there. Things. Hey, some ownerships. Oh, look at that. Yeah, Steph, 90%, 25% captain on DK. Oh, that's right, I gotta go to the phone to check the DK captain ownership. I forgot. Yeah, I said I thought 20% for Draymond. The correct answer was 21.7. So yeah, about as expected there. I guess I'll just click through on the phone. Alright, so Steph, 90% owned, 25% captain. Sure. Draymond, 80% owned, 21.7% captain. Sure. McCollum, 68% owned, 11% captain. Okay. Myers Leonard, 33% owned, 4% captain. Go bravely, young man. Kevon Looney, 23% owned. I'd want a little more than that. 1.5% captain. Zach Collins. No, I had it right. I said I thought he'd be around 25%. 25.63% owned. So that's whomever said that. I honestly did not look at our projections, but someone said that was not that unlikely a captaincy. It turned out to be. So let me see if I can check on and click on a couple other dudes here, and find, if nothing else, some Jordan Bell in our life. Jordan Bell, 30% owned, 1.3% captain. Yeah, I want less than that. I don't have any issue if you have him, but, 30% is significant. He's more than some number of other guys we talked about, and he's not that much cheaper than them, so, yeah. Don't have a super strong take. 22 is super cheap. That's Norman Powell cheap, but, Norman Powell is, production standpoint, reasonably similar fantasy player. The coach basically said was going to play in the high 20s in minutes at least. I don't think we get high 20s in minutes out of Jordan Bell here. So I do think that would be sort of the fate of the day there for me. So I did it again. I didn't have enough things to be self-conscious about. Alright, everyone. There we are done again for the day. I'll be back again tomorrow. Although potentially there for the last time for a week or 10 days. Talking with a couple high-value pieces of talent we're thinking of bringing into co-host shows with me for the NBA Finals. Hoping to do some content for subscribers only before the $2.5 million smorgasbord on DraftKings that begins on that first day of the finals. So, looking forward to seeing you all there. Until then, best of luck, my friends, and